Hi there, my name is Jersey Drozd, and I am the Interim Executive Director of Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. Thank you for coming out to our online festival, CXC 2020. So glad to have you here for our presentation, Charting Paths to Making Comics with Faith Erin Hicks. Now, Faith Erin Hicks is the creator and co-creator of many books that we know and love. I mean, just to name a few, The Nameless City, Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong, Friends with Boys, Pumpkinheads. She writes the Avatar: The Last Airbender comic series. She even writes prose fiction. Her debut novel, which came out last year, is Comics Will Break Your Heart. And her latest graphic novel, From First Second, is 1 Year at Ellesmere. So she's done a lot of books, and a lot of people love them. So why is that? I personally think that a big part of her book's appeal comes from the way she expresses her characters in her lives. There's something in the way she draws the eyes, the way she'll change the lines when big feelings are on the scene, or even the way like she'll zoom in real tight or pull back real far to give us just the right context to silently deliver like what this character is going through. So she knows how to write with images, and that raises the question, did she always know that? Is it like a talent? Is it just something that she was just born with, or is it something that she learned? If it's something she learned, how did she learn it? Well, if that question intrigues you, you're in luck, because tonight Faith is going to take us on her journey to becoming a celebrated author. And then she's going to share the process that she landed on over the course of that journey. And I think what excites me most about this presentation is that it isn't going to be a prescription. You know, Faith is a storyteller. And she's going to share her story as a means to hopefully help you, those of you who want to make comics, to find and navigate your own path, because we each have our own that we have to go on. So now, please join me in welcoming Faith Erin Hicks.
Hi, my name is Faith Erin Hicks, and I'm a cartoonist. That means I write and draw comic books for a living. So I have a presentation here for you guys, and it's basically about how I make comics, how I started making comics. I go through my process, writing and drawing a graphic novel from the very beginning, the beginning of an idea to the finished published book. And I also trace my career from when I was drawing comics in first grade all the way up to my current graphic novel. So right here, we just have a little spread of some of the books I've had published at this point in my career. Oh gosh, I've been making comics full time since 2008, so 12 years already, oh my goodness. And I am currently working on my 15th graphic novel, 15 graphic novels that I have drawn. And about half were written by me and half were written by other authors. So done in collaboration with other people. But yeah, here's a spread of just some of my published work, and let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so these are the 5 stages of making a graphic novel. So it takes me about a year to write and draw a graphic novel from start to finish. So it's a very long process. And stage 1 is excitement. I'm like so excited for this brand new graphic novel. I'm so excited. I have all these amazing images in my head, and I can't wait to get these images out of my head and put them down on the paper in front of me. I'm so ready to draw this book. And stage 2 is despair, as I realize that these amazing images that I have in my head, it is really, really difficult for me to get them on the paper in front of me. Drawing comics is really hard. And even now, as someone who has been making them professionally for over a decade, I sometimes really struggle with interpreting these images I have in my head and getting them down the way that I want them to be on the paper in front of me. So yeah, I spend some time like weeping over my drawing desk and wishing I was a better artist, all those sort of things. And stage 3 is distraction. So yeah, drawing comics is a really long process. It's like running a marathon. And sometimes I can't help but procrastinate. I pretend I'm Godzilla. I stomp around my apartment. I like bother my cat. I do everything but the work. Because sometimes I just can't help it. I gotta procrastinate. And stage 4 is actually drawing the comics. So I sit down, I put my butt in a chair, I draw page after page. It's like trying my best to draw as fast as I can because those deadlines are coming and I got to get this book finished. I got to hand it into my publisher and get it out the door. And stage 5 is sitting back and enjoying seeing all of my hard work in print. I'm so amazed. This amazing book that I've made, my brand new graphic novel book, Baby. I hold it in my hand, I open it up, and this always happens. This always happens. This has happened to me 14 times for my 14 previously published graphic novels. I open my book and there's like a tiny mistake somewhere in the book. And it's not a mistake that you guys as readers would notice, but it's something that I notice. And I feel a little bit sad because my amazing, perfect graphic novel Baby is not as perfect as I wish it was. So yeah, those are the 5 stages of making a graphic novel. In the beginning, okay, so I am going to take you through an amazing journey of seeing my art skills develop over many, many years of working very hard and drawing. I feel like sometimes people have this idea about artists that drawing is something that comes naturally to us. It's something that, it's this innate talent that we're just born with. It's not something that we work hard at. It's not, a skill that we have to hone from years and years of practice. And maybe there are people like that out there, but I am not personally that type of person, that type of artist. I'm someone who has worked incredibly hard over many, many years in order to develop my artistic skills. And yeah, I'm just going to show you examples of that. So yeah, this is like the very first comic that I drew way back in grade 1. And I was like a total horse girl. I loved horses. I rode. And the thing that I wanted the most in the world was my very own pony. So I literally made a comic about going to a stable and my mom bought me a pony. And yeah, these are drawings from, I think I was like 11 or 12, maybe a little bit younger. I don't think I was any older than 12, but this was when I started writing and drawing like my own original stories. And they would always be about like girls and horses or girls and unicorns. I really loved unicorns when I was like a nerdy preteen. I just thought they were so cool. They were like a horse, but magical. So, a horse that could be like your very best friend and stuff like that. So yeah, I obsessively drew unicorns. So this is an example of the artwork that I made when I was, I think about 11 or 12. Okay, the dark years, the dark, very, very awkward years. This is artwork from high school. And this is a fan comic that I made way back in high school that is for this TV show called Mystery Science Theater 3000. And it's an older show, although there was a newer version of it that came out a couple years ago and is on Netflix. You can watch it there. But I loved this TV show when I was a teenager. And the entire concept of the show is it's this guy and he lives on a satellite and he has these 2 robot buddies and they sit and they watch terrible movies and then they make fun of the movies. And that's the entire show. And I was just like obsessed with the show and I loved it. So I made like this little comic about a girl who looks suspiciously like me going up to this satellite where this guy and his 2 robot buddies were, and I just would like hang out with them. So yeah, it's a little embarrassing to show you guys this stuff, but I hope it's encouraging because it'll show how far you can come as an artist. And I'd also like to say that if you're someone like, from the very beginning, I had all these original ideas that I wanted to create and I wanted to like write stories about my own original characters. But if you're someone who prefers to play in someone else's sandbox, like you prefer to tell stories about characters that exist within like the Star Trek universe or the Star Wars universe or the Mystery Science Theater 3000 universe, that is an absolutely valid way to start writing and drawing your own stories, building stories within someone else's universe. Oh, and this is the very first page of my very first webcomic that I posted online on the internet way back in 1999. So this is the dark ages of the internet. There was no social media, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram, no YouTube, nothing like that. In order for you to have your own website and put like webcomics online, you had to like build a website and code it out of HTML. So this webcomic, even though it was a comic that I created while I was in school, while I was in college, I can sit, and I was not paid to do it, and I had no real designs on becoming a cartoonist. I had a whole nother career in mind. I still consider this webcomic to be the beginning of my comics career, because it was basically how I fell in love with making comics. So this very first webcomic, it was called Demonology 101. And it was basically like a ripoff of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I was like super into that TV show, and I loved the idea of a story about a teenage girl who also had like supernatural powers. And so she'd deal with like teen girl stuff and then also like save the world. However, at the time, there was not really any comics like that being published. So I decided to write and draw the kind of comics that I wanted to read. So by the time I was finished Demonology 101, I just graduated college. I graduated in 2004, and the comic was over 750 pages long. So that was my very first comic that I completed. And a lot of times people ask me about making their first comic and do I have any suggestions? And my general suggestion is start short. Start with like a 5-page comic, start with a 50-page comic. Just do something short that you can finish, and then you move on to your next project. But my very first comic ended up taking me 5 years, and when it was complete, was over 750 pages long. So yeah, I'm not very good at taking my own advice, but you can see the advancement in my artwork. Drawing Demonology 101, that was basically how I fell in love with comics, and my art improved by leaps and bounds over the course of the 5 years I drew it. So I'm getting into my published work now. I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of my older work and then dive into my more current stuff. And then I'll show you how I actually make these comics. So this is Friends with Boys, and this was actually my 4th published graphic novel. I had done 2 graphic novels with an indie publisher called SLG Publishing, and then I started working with First Second Books. So Friends with Boys was published by First Second Books in 2012. It is about a homeschooled girl who is going to public high school for the very first time. So she's been homeschooled her entire life, and now she's finally going to go to school, public school, for the first time. She has 3 brothers, and she is haunted by a ghost. I was actually homeschooled until high school, and I also have 3 brothers, but I have never seen a ghost, so there the similarities end. This is Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong. So this is an example of a collaboration. This is a graphic novel that is based on an unpublished young adult novel by an author, Prudence Shen. So I basically took her story and adapted her prose story and adapted it to comics. Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong is about these 2 guys, Nate and Charlie. Nate is a nerd, Charlie is a jock. They've been friends for a really long time, and then they end up competing against each other in a high school election, and things go horribly wrong from there. It's very comedic, it's very over the top. There's also like robot fights in it. I don't know if anyone has seen this show called BattleBots, but there's a plot line in this book that is based around a competition that is very, very similar to BattleBots. And I had to draw all the robots. It was horrible. Oh my gosh, I'm not a fan. Like that's the strange thing about art. It's like, if you practice drawing one thing in particular, you just really get good at drawing that one thing. You don't get good at drawing other things. So because I was someone who had drawn like a lot of people, a lot of like organic things, like I love drawing trees and, you know, pastoral scenery and that kind of thing, but I had no idea how to draw robots. So this was a huge challenge for me. This is The Adventures of Superhero Girl. So there was a new edition of this book published in, I think, 2016. And this was basically my goofy take on superheroes. It is a little bit different from my other comic work because it's a comic strip. So it's like Hobbs or For Better, For Worse. It's, you know, it has gags in it. It is not a contained story that goes from, you know, page 1 to page 200. And Superhero Girl was just basically like me at the time, like it was written and drawn a few years ago. I think I drew it from 2010 to 2012. And at the time, like I really liked the idea of superhero comics, but I was very frustrated with them. I wanted to see stories that were about like young women dealing with superpowers and, you know, the day-to-day life struggle. So Superhero Girl is very much like that. And it's also very, very silly. For example, so like Superhero Girl, it's like she has, her powers are she can jump over buildings that are shorter than 11 stories. She's nigh invulnerable, but she's kind of like a little bit ordinary in like the superhero department. Oh, and she also has a brother who is like much more successful than her. So yeah, she ends up fighting like very mundane types of villains because she lives in Canada, and Canada has this real supervillain deficiency. So like one time she ends up fighting the League of Villainous Canadian Stereotypes. So we got like the lumberjack, we got Double Double, fueled by the power of 1,000 Tim Hortons coffees, La Toucom, the man hat brought to hideous life in a Quebec laboratory, and Farley Mowat. I feel like nobody gets that joke except for like Canadians of a certain age, but I love the idea. Farley Mowat being like an evil Canadian stereotype. Anyway, please laugh. Yeah. Oh, and one thing that was so strange. So like I made this comic just for myself, you know, like I didn't really think it would go anywhere. And then Dark Horse published an edition of it. And all of a sudden it won an Eisner Award for like best kids comic back in 2014. And it was just, I don't know, it was so strange and so wonderful. Superhero Girl is definitely like, for me, the comic that has succeeded in like astonishing ways, I guess. Like sometimes you send something out into the world and you think, no one is going to like this except for me. And I just made it for me, and that's fine. But this has found a lot of readers and has resonated with a lot of people. And I just think that's wonderful. And kids really like it too, because like it's funny and it's silly. So I love that. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into my most recent work. This is the Nameless City trilogy. So this is a real departure for me. It was my very first time doing a fantasy trilogy. I'd never done a book. I'd never done a graphic novel series. I'd never done like a series of books. Everything that I'd done before had been a complete story in one book. So this was a huge challenge, and I was so excited to dive into it. So the Nameless City is, it's a city within this fantasy world where there are these three nations, and they are constantly struggling with each other. And the Nameless City is a city that is in this world, in a location that is very strategic. It is built around the only passage in this impenetrable mountain range, the only passage that ships can sail through to the river on one side and then the ocean on the other. So the city is like very, very important to trade throughout this world. And whatever nation controls the city becomes very, very wealthy. So as a result, these three great nations, they're constantly fighting over the cities, constantly struggling to control it. And then we have thousands of years of like immigration and conflict over this city. So as a result, the city's population is incredibly diverse, lots of different people living there, coming there to trade, to work. And it's something like, I'm fascinated by immigration and by multiculturalism. I think it's it's the history of humanity right there. And I really wanted to create a fantasy story built around these ideas. And have it be about these two kids who come from opposite sides of the main conflict in the Nameless City, which is this idea of who owns the city, who can live there, who should be in charge of it. So we have these two kids, the girl Rat, she is a street kid who has been orphaned by conflict, and Kai, the boy, he is a member of the ruling elite. His family, his people are now in charge of the city. So he has a lot of privilege compared to Rat. So yeah, there's lots of like things that I love drawing, which is like running and jumping and action and like really, really complicated cityscapes. Oh my gosh. So many late nights just drawing like rooftops and bricks and things like that. And then, you know, the relationship between these two children who are growing up in this like very, very complicated political landscape. Oh yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the influences for Nameless City. So I feel like this series was like me swinging for the fences. It was like I wanted to do the kind of story that I love the most in the world. And these are three examples of the kind of fantasy stories that I love the most. Bone by Jeff Smith, Avatar: The Last Ender, the animated series, and the incredible manga Fullmetal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. And all three of these have incredible characters, really cool world building, and also really amazing fight scenes. And these were all things that were just so inspiring to me, and something that I wanted to replicate in the Nameless City. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about character design. So the cool thing about comics is that because they are a visual medium, you can have your character design or how your character looks say something about who they are as people. And that's something that I really strive for in my work. I want my characters to be identifiable by how they look. So I did like so much sketching and so many different drawings of Rad and Kai, the two main characters in the Nameless City, before I settled on their final design. So these are like some of the sketches. So Kai, for example, he is a member of a very specific culture. They're called the Dao Nation, and they are very militaristic. And he's also in the city for the very first time to meet his father. And he's basically like a junior cadet. So in the army, so he needs to wear an outfit that identifies him as a member of that culture, of that society, and then also look like a little bit militaristic. In contrast, Rad is an orphan. She is someone who does not have parental oversight. And her outfit should basically reflect her multicultural upbringing. And then also the fact that she's probably like scrounged it up from different locations. So yeah, and made it herself. So like, yeah, like this is probably like 0.01% of all of the sketches I did of these characters. I kind of went a little crazy. And here's how they look in the book. So as you can see, oh, can I go back? Oh yeah, all right. As you can see, they look very different here. And then this is the final design for their final design for book 1. And then they have new outfits in book 2 and book 3. So yeah, and I also want to talk a little bit about using reference in your comics. I feel like sometimes people have this idea about artists that everything we draw comes from our head. And if you can't like pluck these images out of your brain and put them down on the paper in front of you without using reference, then you're no kind of artist. But that's really not the case. I use a lot of reference in my work, especially for something like Nameless City. The setting of the Nameless City is very much inspired by Central Asia, especially China in the 13th century. So I spent a lot of time going online, researching how to draw these buildings, how to authentically portray a city that was very multicultural, so has lots of influences from outside countries, but then also is still rooted in that particular culture. And I didn't want to assume that I knew ahead of time what this type of architecture would look like. So my advice is, if you're struggling to draw something, look at a photograph of it. That's what I do all the time. For example, even though now in my career, I'm very comfortable with drawing people, sometimes I still struggle with drawing hands. Like hands are really, really complicated to draw. So like every now and then I'll just be like, oh, how does this hand work? So then I'll go and like maybe take a photograph of my hand as reference with my phone. And then I have that photo on my phone that I can use to draw from. So I highly encourage people to use reference in your work. It gives your drawing a sense of place, a sense of substance. I highly endorse it. Oh yeah, so not only do I do original comics, but I also, original comics being like, I create the world, I create the character, but I also do licensed comics, which is me doing comics based on someone else's creations. And I am the writer for Dark Horse's Avatar: The Last Airbender comics. So yeah, after doing Nameless City, which was my own homage to Avatar, which is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, I got hired to write Avatar comics. And, it's something that is just so amazing. And I don't know, I can't believe that I get to make comics based on my favorite TV show. So Avatar is a collaboration with an American artist, Peter Wortman. Peter is wonderful to work with. I love him as an artist. I just think he's so skilled, so talented. And then also he is a really awesome collaborator. He's a really good guy to work with. So we finished a trilogy of Avatar comics that was called Imbalance. And Imbalance has been just collected into a giant library edition, it's called, a giant hardcover, and that is available wherever books are sold. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy my Avatar comics. These are set after the events of the show and also continue the previous Avatar comics that were done by Jean Yang and Guri Huru. And there are, I think, 5 collected editions of graphic novels that Jean and Guri Huru did. And then Imbalance is the 6th one. So I highly recommend checking out both Jean and Guri Huru's comics before you read ours. And this is my most recently published original work. This is Pumpkinheads. And this was a collaboration with a very famous best-selling author, Rainbow Rowell, known for Eleanor and Park, Fangirl. Right now, she has this very, very popular fantasy trilogy called Carry On, or I'm not sure what the overall trilogy is called. The first book was called Carry On. The second book is called Wayward Son. And I think there'll be a third book out soon. Yeah, it's like hugely popular. But Pumpkinheads was Rainbow's very first original graphic novel. So it was wonderful to get the chance to collaborate with her on this book. And it's a little bit different from my previous works. It's very comedic and very sweet. And it's about these two teenagers, these two friends, and they're seasonal friends. They really only see each other when they work at this pumpkin patch over the Halloween holiday. And this pumpkin patch is just amazing, and it's full of like all these incredible pumpkin things and incredible food. And this graphic novel traces their adventures that they go on the very last night that they're working at this pumpkin patch, and then they're going to go away to college. So yeah, it's like friendship and romance and like comedy. It's very, very sweet. And yeah, this one came out last year from First Second Books, and it was actually on the New York Times bestselling list, which was the very first time I've ever had like a best-selling book. So that was really exciting for me. But yeah, by all means, check out Pumpkinheads. Okay, so I'm going to dive into collaborating with artists. So I just wanted to compare how I work on an Avatar script versus how I drew Rainbow's script that she wrote for Pumpkinheads. So for Avatar, it's fairly straightforward. When I write scripts for an artist to draw, I like doing panel breakdowns. If I worked with an artist who wanted to do their own panel breakdowns, I would certainly be open to that, but this is how Peter and I work. So I basically, each page will have a breakdown. So it will say page 1, panel 1, and then I will describe what goes on in that panel. So Peter can then interpret it visually, and then I will add any dialogue that needs adding. So Rainbow's script was a little bit different. So like my request to her was write the script and let me do the panel breakdowns, because then I can bring like my expertise as a cartoonist to that. And she was very generous and agreed to do that. So basically what she wrote was a screenplay. So then I took that screenplay and I made these incredibly messy comic thumbnails. So you can see like on the left is the original script from Rainbow. And then on the right is my very, very messy thumbnail of that page. And I'm just basically like taking her words, visually interpreting them, and jotting down like a rough blueprint of what the comic page will look like. And then once I had like this very rough blueprint, which nobody else sees but me, I typed up the script based on that blueprint, and pretty much like copying and pasting and like dropping Rainbow's original screenplay into a comic script. So yeah, this is what the script looked like basically. So I was just like breaking it into panels and adding the dialogue in. And yeah, I didn't change anything about Rainbow's original script. I just took it and adapted it to the comics format. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the more nitty-gritty of making comics. A lot of times people ask me, what do I use to make comics? Like, what are my tools? I love talking about my tools. I am not, like, I know I see like very annoyed cartoonists being like, don't ask me what pen that I ink, don't ask me what I ink with, because that's like, I guess it can be like a reductive question. Like, it's like the pen makes you, the pen is special, not your skill. But for me personally, I really love talking about my tools. So I will not get mad if you ask me what pen I use. But these are just like all of the tools that I've used like over the course of my career. Like I switch up my tools sometimes, I find new tools. I love talking to other artists about their tools. So sometimes all of the things that I use now as a cartoonist, these are things that were recommended to me by other cartoonists. So I don't know, I love talking about my tools. So this is the process of writing and drawing a graphic novel from start to finish. So in the very beginning, I got my idea. It's developed in my head for many years. I'm super excited about it. And then once I have my idea and I have a general idea of what I want this graphic novel to be about, what the story will be, what the story beats are, I sit down and I basically do a thumbnail draft of the entire book. And it's very, very rough. It's just basically an overall blueprint of what the graphic novel will look like. I know some cartoonists who dive immediately into scripting, but for me, this thumbnail stage is very important because it allows me to figure out the pacing, the visual pacing of the comic book. Like for me, comics are a combination of art and writing, and I personally feel like one should not take precedence over the other. So doing this thumbnail draft allows me to find that balance. So here's what my thumbnails look like. I do 2 a page, so like an open book. So this on the left, that is thumbnails from Friends with Boys. And that was actually way back when I just did like 1 thumbnail per page, and I don't do that anymore. Now I do 2, like the book is open in front of me. So on the right are thumbnails from Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong. And I would write the dialogue in by hand and just number it so it would correspond with the character that was speaking in each panel. So as you can see, they're super messy. They're like less than stick figures, and it's just me figuring out the pacing, the development, the visual flow of this graphic novel. So once I have finished that script, then of course I will type it up. Then of course I will type it up and hand it into my editor, and we go back and forth, and she gives me notes and that kind of thing. After that script has been approved and it's ready to draw, I will sit down and I will start drawing this comic. So penciling comics, that is the most time-consuming part of the process. It could take me like, I don't know, it could take me like 6 to 8 months to pencil a graphic novel. That is the part I find the most stressful and the most exhausting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about doing comics traditionally, and then I'm going to move into my current process, which is a hybrid traditional digital process. So the first 10 graphic novels I had published, I did entirely traditionally. So I drew with these, let's see if I can go back. Oh yeah, there we go. So here's a photograph on the right of the pencils that I used. I used light blue coal erase pencils. They're made by Prismacolor. They're available at your local art supply store. They're really cheap. They're less than $1. And I started using these pencils when I went to college. I went to college for animation. And when animation was done traditionally, when it was entirely done by hand, these were the type of pencils that animators would use. So I started using these pencils because I was in school for animation. And I really like them. I really like them for drawing. I like the light blue color. And then there's also a technical reason why the light blue is awesome. So this is what a typical traditionally penciled page will look like. This is a page from Friends with Boys. It's very messy. I'm a very messy artist, very messy penciler in particular. So I just basically make a giant mess, and those are my pencils. So yeah, and then there's my script on the right. So I'm following it pretty closely. If I'm writing a script for me to draw, me personally, I don't tend to include as much visual direction as I would include in like an avatar script for Peter to draw, because it's like, if I'm drawing this script, I know what the visuals are going to be. I have my thumbnails, I have the images in my head. So after drawing my first 10 graphic novels traditionally, I changed my method of work to a hybrid traditional or hybrid digital traditional way of making comics. So back in 2014, just when I was starting drawing the Nameless City trilogy, I bought a Wacom Cintiq. I always used to call it Wacom, and I learned recently it's actually Wacom. So I've been living a lie for like the last 6 years. But I brought myself a Wacom Cintiq, and it's basically a giant computer monitor that you can draw on using a digital stylus. And I downloaded these amazing drawing brushes from this website called friendin.com. And I draw in a program now it's called Clip Studio. It used to be called Manga Studio back when I started using it. It's an amazing sketching digital art program. I highly recommend it, and it is super cheap. It is like less than $50 just to own it outright, like not a subscription. You don't have to pay monthly. You own it outright for like $50. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. And the reason that I switched to this digital process for penciling was I just wanted to be faster. Like drawing comics is very laborious. And I felt like drawing digitally would make me faster, and it did. It absolutely did. Like I don't think I would have been able to do Nameless City as quickly as I did. Like I put out a book a year for 3 years with Nameless City, and that was really difficult. But I did it, and I definitely would not have been able to do it if I was not, if I was not digitally penciling. I mean, just drawing all those backgrounds alone. So, however, I still really like the inking process, the traditional inking process. It is my favorite part of making comics. And I did not want to give that up. I did not want my comic pages to be entirely digital. So I came up with this hybrid process where I take my digital pencils and I print them out onto giant sheets of Bristol paper, which is just basically like a thick paper. It's very nice. It takes ink very, very well. And then I ink over top my digital pencil. So yeah, you can see the process right there. That's on the left, the page with the red pencils. That's how the page looks digitally on my computer screen. And then there's my printer in the middle. I actually just had to replace that printer. It was 6 years old, so it lasted me quite a while. And then that's on the right, that's the page as it looks having been printed by the printer. And then my favorite part of the process, inking with a brush. I love it. It is awesome. So this is just basically me cleaning up my super messy pencils. I trace over top of them with this brush. I use a watercolor brush. It is a Raphael Klinsky, and I use a size 1. You can get them at most fine art supply stores. They're kind of pricey. I think they run about like $20 each, but they are absolutely worth it. I don't know, I absolutely love them. And I just basically take my brush and I dip it into a pot of ink and trace over top my super messy pencils. And yeah, this is absolutely my favorite part of the process. And then, and so this goes back to the cool thing about like blue pencils and why I will, even though I'm penciling digitally, I print out my pencils in a blue color. The cool thing about this blue line artwork is that when you scan it into the computer, the blue is light enough that it disappears from your inks. So you don't have to worry about erasing blue pencil lines or having to clean up the artwork in Photoshop. So it's awesome. And that is why I use either blue pencils if I'm doing something entirely traditionally, or blue line printing if I am doing my hybrid digital traditional process. So yeah, that is, and then I'm done, ta-da! And I got this giant stack of comic book pages all ready to be shoved into the art closet. Yeah, pretty much every comic book artist I feel like has a closet that is just piled full of comic pages, and it's terrible. Yeah. So yeah, that is my process. And I usually say this at the beginning of this talk and I forgot, so I'm going to say it now. I do want to say this is how I make comics. This is not how you have to make comics. If you're interested in making comics, absolutely find a way and a process that works for you. You can use entirely different tools. These are tools that I have found work the best for me and makes my life easier as an artist. So yeah, I feel like there is no one way to do comics. And that's actually something that I'm curious to ask my host about. Jersey, I'd love to know, how do you make comics? Do you work entirely traditionally? Do you work digitally? How do you do it?
So, how do I do it? I use a variety of approaches, very similar to yours, actually, in that I switched to Clip Studio about 5-7 years ago, and I absolutely love it. It's such a versatile program, and it's such a, after decades of trying to work in Photoshop, to use an application that is like, hey, let's design it for actually what cartoonists do.
Yeah, like one of the reasons I really picked up that program in particular is that it has these amazing perspective tools where you can just like lay down a grid and immediately start drawing on top of it, and like snap your tool to that grid. And that was a lifesaver doing Nameless City because I had to draw so many buildings.
Oh yeah. I remember you sharing a lot of the process of those tiles on those roofs, and there's some intense spreads in there. But going back to like one place where we diverge a little bit is that I do 2 rounds of thumbnails, and I wanted to kind of pick at something because I actually grabbed this while you're talking, was like this idea of talking about visual pacing and rhythms. Is my first round of thumbnails I actually do on little yellow sticky notes like this. And actually I learned this from a student, is that like, 'cause at this size, you really are confining yourself to not be able to draw anything well, right? So like the whole idea of perfectionism is out the door. But the way I describe it to my students is like, all I'm thinking about at the sticky note level is, am I close to the character? Am I far away? Is it a big panel? Is it a small panel? I'm not thinking about dialogue. I'm not thinking about body language. I'm not thinking about what the architecture is. It's just like, it's almost like listening to the conversation through a wall, listening to this muffled, blurry version of what the story's going to be. And then I do the second round, like you do in your notebooks, where it's like, okay, now it's about like, half the size of a letter size sheet of paper. And now I'm thinking about, okay, what's the angle going to be? Rough idea of dialogue. So I'm curious, like when you're thinking about pacing, how do you think about it? Like, because I know that's something when I was a teenager, it would have been lost on me. It'd be really hard for me to grok that idea of like what visual pacing means. And so I'm curious, like in your words, what does it mean to you?
So I feel like when I approach comics, I'm very concerned about getting the characters' emotions on the page. Like, and I feel like that guides my visual pacing a lot of times. It's like, what is this character feeling in this moment? And what sort of visuals do they need in order to show those feelings? If someone is sad, like, is there a moment where they need like a couple panels to show them like breaking down? Or if a character's angry, how do we show the build to that? Or is it something that happens like really, really quickly? So it's like one panel, they're like starting to simmer, and then the next they're just like flying off the handle or something like that. So that I would say is my number one concern. I feel like I don't know, like I feel like I'm not a pure artist. Like I'm less concerned about beautiful artwork on the page than I am about the emotional storytelling. Like that is my approach to comics. And that's the thing, that is my number one concern in comics. I would rather have a page that shows like, the character's emotions on the page rather than, I don't know, like strikingly gorgeous artwork sometimes. I don't know, like it is definitely a different approach than I've heard from other artists. And I certainly enjoy comics that are just like beautiful images, but the ones that stay with me are the ones that really emphasize emotional storytelling.
Something I've seen you do in your work, and I'll switch to, here we go. I got a drawing app up I can pull up. And it's like, I've seen you do tricks like this, where it's like, okay, I've got a panel and I'll have like a character feeling glum like this. And everybody bear with me. I am not the artist that Faith is, especially not in this like whiteboard app. But then like you'll do it like this and you'll get really far away from them.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And like the one on the right hangs in your head more because, now they're really alone. They're all alone, and like, and maybe they're not alone in the room, but they're alone with whatever they're feeling in that moment. And so it's like, I think about like with the kind of storytelling you do, I like this idea of like you saying like, well, maybe I'm not going for great art. Maybe what you're going for is like visual poetry, right? Yeah. Where it's really about the inner life and the simile and the metaphor and the figurative approach to communicating with images.
Yeah, I'd buy that. I feel like there's so many ways to approach comics. Like you can do it like that, like very focusing so much on the emotional storytelling, or you can do it just through like incredible shots of landscapes and have it be like no people at all. Or like you can have something that's really emotional, but you're just showing like tiny fragments of a body or things like that. Like I've seen all of those types of storytelling. And that's something that I really love about comics, that it's such a versatile medium, and there are so many valid ways to approach storytelling. And I feel like I learn the most from cartoonists who do it really differently. I don't know. It's just something that I love about comics. Like there's no one way to do them. I will say that probably my influences also come from growing up really loving movies and really enjoying film language in particular. I'm sort of less into film now. Now I'm more of a, I don't know. Now I read more books, I guess. I don't know what you'd call that, literary fan or something like that. But like I grew up like really loving movies and really, really enjoying visual film language. And I do feel like that gets put into my comics a lot.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that, like, if I was 17, you were saying this to me, I'd be like, oh, whatever, old person. But I would be is like, just consume a lot of media, like, because like the influences shouldn't just be from the one place that you like that. Like when I was 17, it was like Spider-Man comics and nothing else. I don't care about anything else. Don't tell me about anything else. Yeah, well, maybe you should read these books on Greek mythology. Maybe you should read these books about, like Eudora Welty. Maybe you should be watching some, old cinema, like It Happened One Night or something like that. There may be other things in there that you will inform your art in ways that you hadn't expected.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I actually didn't read a lot of comics growing up. And that was simply because, not because I didn't like them. I remember being just very attracted to comics as a medium, but there was just no access, like it was before comics were stocked in libraries. It was before comics were in bookstores. And I grew up in this small town where the only comic book store was this like hovel, and I was terrified, because it was like this. Anyway. That was a different time. That was a very different time. We were in a much better place, thanks to a confluence of events, the major book publishers getting involved, the manga boom, and so on. And people like you, sort of leading the way with early webcomics, like you said, like back in like 1999. Holy cow, that's the vanguard. Webcomics, I feel like, so like I grew up reading like Tintin and Asterix because I was Canadian, and those comics have a lot of cultural cachet here because, we are a bilingual nation, and Tintin is from Belgium, and Asterix is from France. So because of the French language, they're brought into schools a lot. So I love Tintin and Asterix, but then there just wasn't anything else for me to read or available for me except Bone. I found Bone when I was like 20, 21, and it was just like finally a comic for me, and like that changed. Yeah, so like that was a really huge deal. But I grew up loving media. Like I loved movies, I loved books, I loved video games, and like consume it all. Like watch movies, watch all kinds of movies.
All kinds, yeah.
Like I don't know. I sound pretentious, but it's like I grew up watching like Indiana Jones and Lawrence of Arabia, and just like. Oh my God. Like my parents were film buffs as well. So anyway.
No, yeah. I think that's all good. And like consuming it with like kind of a ravenous spirit where it's like, it's not about like, well, I can only consume good. So like Gamera would be a good candidate too. There's probably something to learn in there, So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I just think, well, I don't know. Movies are really struggling now, but it's like, I don't know. I really loved having that kind of influence throughout, my younger years, because I don't know, I just feel like growing up with movies and books and all of these amazing things is, I don't know, I feel like that's just a really good foundation for being creative later in life, if that is the type of career you want to pursue. Just absorb everything and enjoy it, and take what's valuable to you and keep it, and discard the rest.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, Faith, thank you so much. I think everybody, if you could in the chat, give a round of applause to Faith for this awesome presentation. I think it was full of really good and useful stuff that I wish I would have had access to when I was a teenager.
Oh, I know.
And we will open it up to questions and answers in the Zoom webinar. And then we can always take the discussion later on to the CXC Discord at cartooncrossroadscolumbus.org/Discord. So once again, thank you, Faith.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's get Faith in here. Hey.
Hey!
That was awesome.
That was back when I still had my long quarantine hair. I got a haircut like 2 days ago. I was like staring at my bangs like, oh.
Oh man. So how do you want to do the questions? Because we got a lot. There's no way we can get through all of them. So we have to pick and choose. And I don't know if you want to pick your favorites, or do you want me to choose ones to pitch at you?
I mean, if you have some, that would be great. I haven't looked at them yet. So
okay.
If you've been like going through and picking out ones that sound interesting, let's go.
Yeah, there's a really good mix. By the way, everybody, thank you so much for providing such really thoughtful questions.
Really appreciate it.
And people are even wishing you happy birthday in the chat. But we got a we've got a terrific mix of technical questions and sort of like quality of life questions, right? And as somebody who is so adept at navigating the psychology of your characters, I'm wondering if you start with one of the emotional questions.
Okay, let's go.
So, let's see where there's a lot of them in here. Someone was asking about dealing with feeling discouraged, right? This idea of like, how do you navigate the parts where you're feeling like a little bit low about the work? Because I would wager that you sometimes don't feel awesome about your work.
Yeah, I feel like this is the great struggle as an artist to somehow manage to keep going when you feel like your work isn't good enough. I feel like if you're going to pursue an arts career, you're always going to meet people along the way who will discourage you. I absolutely had those experiences in art school. Like my mom actually just sent me, it's literally like right here. This is my college diploma. My mom just sent it to me, and my experience, like I went to art college. I did a 3-year animation program at this like very prestigious animation school, and it was a very discouraging experience. I nearly quit drawing after I graduated because I was just so discouraged, and it felt like all of the hard work that I put into it, I wasn't seeing great results. And then even worse, it was like people didn't seem to acknowledge that I was working really hard. They were just looking at the work that I was producing and saying repeatedly, "You're not good enough." So yeah, that is absolutely hard. I found that the things that got me through those stages of my life was to do work that was just for me. And that was actually where comics really helped me. The cool thing about comics is one person can do a comic. One person can draw and write. And I took a lot of solace from putting my work online. And this was a long time ago. This was like maybe 10 years ago, and the internet was much smaller and much kinder as well. But people were, with very few exceptions, very lovely to me online and very encouraging of my work. And that was something that I kept very close to my heart. So even though I was having, in the real world, people in positions of authority, art school teachers, directors on animation projects that I was on, actively discouraging me and telling me I was not doing a good job, my art was not good enough. People on the internet liked my comics. And that was wonderful, it was. But I do want to emphasize, like, I did these comics for me. Like, I didn't do them to get attention or anything like that. I did them for me. And that's what I would say. Draw for yourself, draw stories that interest you, spend time with characters that you created that belong to you. And it can really help get you through those challenging times.
Yeah. I think that's there's a purity of motivation in that too, that like it's that protects you from getting lost when you are making something that's just for you, right?
Yeah. And I would just like to say, every successful artist has a story, has dozens of stories about people not believing that in them and telling them that they're crap. Like, every successful artist has that story. So you too can become a successful artist with that story.
That is an awesome title for a motivational book.
Yeah.
We all got dumped on. So if you're getting dumped on, you can be a successful artist too. So we get a couple questions about the size of paper you work on when you're printing out your pencils. What size are you inking?
So my original inks are, the page size is 11 by 17. No, yes, 11 by 17 inches. But the actual drawing on those pages that I print out, they're only 10 inches by 14.5 inches. So
okay.
Let me see. Where is it? This is the first second book right here. So this is about the same. This is about the size that First Second publishes at. So this is about the size of my published work, and the size that I draw at is about 1.5 times the size of publication. And that's just a size that works for me. I know some people that draw much larger. I know others that draw much smaller. This is just what works for me. So yeah, 10 inches by 14 and a half inches.
Another technical question before we shift to another like broader question.
Let's do technical.
You don't happen to remember what kind of printer you bought, like offhand? Like I wouldn't be able to tell you the name of my printer, but
yeah. So the original printer that I bought, it has been discontinued, so it's no longer available. But that was an Artisan 1430. But right now I have like a Brother. No, what is it? It's a Canson. Yeah, it's like a Canson 3-in-1 printer, scanner, copy machine. I only use the printing and scanning functions, but it's great. If people are interested in what kind of printer that I have that works for me, please, ask on Twitter, and I'll send you the model and make.
Ah, that's great. And thank you for participating in the chat earlier, like telling people what tools you're using. That's another thing I think is really neat, is that, yeah, I've met artists who get a little bit bristly when you ask them what kind of pen they use.
I love mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're in love, you want to tell the world. Isn't that what Carl Sagan said?
And like, absolutely. I feel like tools don't make the artist, but finding the right tools makes your job easier as an artist. So it's like, if I can,
so happy.
Yeah, if I can make someone's job easier, and because like for me, I really struggled with inking until I found brushes, and then it was like, oh, this is for me.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So now we have Greta, who is watching live, who is 10 years old.
Hi.
And Greta says, do you have any ideas or suggestions for Greta to try to make comics? If you could speak to 10-year-old Faith, what would you say?
So Greta, one thing that I really love doing is I love making comics about things that happen to me in my daily life. So sometimes I get invited to schools and to talk about comics. And so sometimes I go and talk to like a bunch of 6th graders about making comics. And I love to do a demonstration at the end of my talk that is just doing very simply a 3-panel comic with a volunteer. One of the kids volunteers to tell me about their morning. So like I draw one little panel of, the very first thing that they did in the morning. So, they're waking up, and then I ask them, what's the next thing that you did? And the kid will say, oh, well, I ate breakfast. So then I draw a panel of them eating breakfast. And then I say, well, what's the next thing that you did? And they're like, oh, I went to school. So then I draw them, sitting with their mom and dad in the car driving to school. And that is something that I really enjoy. Like I love making comics about just things that happen to me in daily life. And it's like, like make a comic about you and a friend hanging out, or make a comic about you going with maybe one of your parents to the grocery store or something like that. And, try and explore creatively a way to make that journey like super interesting and super fun. So I really love drawing on real life in order to make comics. And lots of cartoonists I know, they make diary comics, like detailing their lives, their daily lives. And I think that's a great way to get started, because you don't have to worry about like creating characters or doing world building. You just, drawing from real life.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I wish 10-year-old Jersey could have heard that. So
I wish
do you have time for,
because like they're so fun, like doing like little 3-panel comics with like someone who's 10 years old, and it's just so much fun.
Greta, if you do that, will you share them with us eventually?
That would be great. Yeah, do like a 3-panel comic about like the first 3 things that you did this morning, Greta.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, do you have time for one more?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're over time a little bit, and I just wanted to, respect your time.
No.
There's just a lot of excitement in the room right now, and there was a lot of material that you covered in your awesome presentation. So Brandon asks, being someone who's done both webcomics and long-form print comics, are the challenges of both relatively the same to you as far as working on a sustained project over time, or are there challenges unique to webcomics that you don't really encounter when making graphic novels?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like with webcomics, so I haven't done like a regular webcomic in many, many years, but I know from my past experiences doing webcomics, and then from what I've seen, what I've heard from my friends who make their living doing webcomics, like the audience element is a very big part of making webcomics. So it's like, you're constantly like, when you do a graphic novel, it's basically like you go into the woods and you work for a year, and then like you come back out and you're like, here's my graphic novel, I hope you like it. With webcomics, it's very different because like you're posting possibly, 5 times a week, possibly once a week, and you're getting audience feedback. And like I know for some web cartoonists, it's like sometimes that will change, like possible future storylines in their webcomic because of how the audience reacts. And with graphic novels, it's like you already have your idea, your idea from start to finish. And then you finish it and you send it out into the world and you hope that people like it. So yeah, like with webcomics, it's like, yeah, everything is created live. And then, like you're getting this direct feedback, which I think can be really, really great and really special. I also think like if you're someone who tends to be a little anxious, like I do, it might potentially drive me crazy, because I'd just be so nervous about how an audience would respond. Like, I don't know. I don't know how, like, like I follow like Jeff Jocks online and he does questionable content and like his audience is so huge. And I don't know how he does like storylines and then just like sends them out into the world. And people will like they're reading the storyline as he's writing it. So it's like, it might be halfway through and people are already like trying to guess like what's going to happen next. And it's like, I don't know. It seems.
Yeah. How do you keep that from affecting you? Right. Like, yeah, I've heard this from like mystery writers who like release pieces of their mystery novels online and they're like,
serialized. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, you just like put like 1,000 people on the case to solve your mystery. So they often will figure it out.
I mean, I feel like that's also come up with television. Like I think there's a really famous instance where, that serial killer show Dexter, like there was one season where like a bunch of people on the Reddit Dexter forum guessed the end of the season, like after like watching the first episode. So the TV writers were like, oh, what now? So yeah. I mean, it's human nature to want to discuss things, but yeah, I don't know. I would feel like I personally, I enjoy both actually. Like I love serialized television, and serialized storytelling, but I also love just sitting down and like reading an entire thing in one sitting.
Oh man. Yeah, me too. Yeah. And I've done webcomics and I've done, published work where you sit on it for a year and it's the workload thing is totally the same. It's just a matter of like the rubber's meeting the road earlier on when you make a webcomic, which can be, like you pointed out, pluses. There's trade-offs. I guess that's the way of thinking about it. There's trade-offs.
Yeah, like working on a graphic novel can be really isolating. Like I sometimes post little snippets on social media and stuff like that, but the reality is, this is paid work for a publisher, so I don't feel comfortable posting like, large chunks of the work online. And it can be kind of lonely, because it's like you're creating this thing and you hope that people like it, but you don't know if they will. Yeah. No idea.
Yeah. So, I want to respect your time. We've gone well over, but
it's quite all right. No, I'm just scrolling through some of the Q&As. There are some of the comments. They're really interesting. Sorry, continue if you have one.
Oh, I was gonna say that you're gonna be in the CXC Discord on Monday, the 5th.
Yeah.
So
I should check.
Yeah, you can find it in the schedule at cartooncrossroadscolumbus.org/schedule. Faith is going to be doing a Discord stream and hanging out. And given the popularity of tonight's event, we might have to have, because Discord has a limit on how many people can watch the stream, we might have to have like an overflow room. But yeah, you're going to be around for another half hour during the show this weekend. So people, if they have more questions for you, they can take it there too, right?
Yeah, that'd be great actually, because I always get a little nervous when I'm like drawing for a stream or something. So to have questions to answer, then by all means. Well, let me like maybe answer one.
Okay.
Out of the Q&A. Let's see. Oh, someone. Let's see. Please to the overflow room. Oh, overflow room. Let's see. I'm gonna answer. Which is the one? What? Oh, I'll do this one because I'm always interested in like the financial ones. Where have you found you get the most income from? creating your own work, or collaborations. So about half of my graphic novels are collaborations with writers or artists. And I think if you want to have a sustained career as a cartoonist, like working on comics, I think it's good to do both. I think it's good to make yourself invaluable and to like really emphasize that you have your own voice in comics. So write and draw your own stuff. But I mean, I don't know how other people are, but I can't come up with like brand new ideas every single year. So being able to collaborate with someone means you can produce more work, right? Because it's like, I don't have to come up with a brand new idea. Someone else can write that story and I can draw it. So I would say do both, like absolutely do both. And then that has really allowed me to have a sustained career in comics. But yeah, like my most popular book, the one that has earned me the most royalties, has been Pumpkinheads. But you know, that's to be expected, as it is a collaboration with, you know, a very, very popular young adult author, which is great. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's another tip, is like partner with a very popular young adult author.
Find a best-selling author and draw their book, then heck yeah.
Faith, thank you so much. I think it was a delightful presentation, and thanks to everybody who showed up into the live stream, in the Zoom webinar, and in the live stream everywhere else. Again, cartooncrossroadscolumbus.org/schedule is where you'll find where Faith is going to be next on October 5th. And if you want, Faith, I'll even fly Copilot with you again to help, you know, feed in the questions so you can focus on doing, you know, live drawing.
Yeah, that would be perfect. I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. All right.
Everyone, I'm sorry we didn't get to more questions, but yeah, thank you so much for attending. And if you want to know anything like really specific that I can answer on Twitter, feel free to tweet me. I'm faitherinhicks.com. No, just like at Faith Erin Hicks. There we go. That's all.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye, guys.